Hey guys, Collin Chi, certified nutritional consultant, numerologist, bringing you guys another talk today. Today I'm going to be talking about the dangers of excessive positivity. Positivity has its place in life, but negativity also has its place. I want to attempt to show you the yin-yang polarity of these two, and attempt to strike a balance between them and show you that balance is more important than being overly positive to the point that you're in denial and that you're not accepting some of the negative and darker aspects of yourself. You can become more holistic, more unified as a person, a better person, a little less hostile, less neurotic, if you understand that positivity has its use and it is very beneficial in certain instances, but the over application of our positivity and morality creates a lot of rigidity. It creates sometimes destructive tendencies to a greater extreme than if we weren't extremely positive. We become extremely negative, and going back and forth between two big extremes if we are too extreme in one category. So I'm going to talk to you about the shadow in psychology. I'm going to be talking about astrology. I'm going to give you guys some amazing quotes that you've probably never heard. I'm also going to talk to you briefly about quantum physics and how all this stuff relates to the sometimes dogmatic positivity that is inherent in the self-help movement, sometimes in the spiritual movements and the feel-good motivational teachings that are out there that really focus almost too much on seeking the light and bettering ourselves and becoming the greatest version of ourselves. These are very positive things at a certain stage of our evolution and development as human beings and consciousness, but it's not the end-all, be-all only stage. You should be continually progressing and growing into new levels of consciousness and evolution. And I want to show you the negative aspects, the negativity of positivity when positivity is taken to the extreme. So there's some issues with this. I'll kick it off. I'm just going to kind of go all over where my brain goes. I'm going to kick it off with negativity can only affect you if you are on the same frequency as it. Okay, that's a simple little quote. A lot of people get overly susceptible to negativity because they're still, in a way, unconsciously in that mindset of negativity. Once you reach a certain point where you're a little more stoic, a little less reactive to your own thoughts and to your surroundings, you can deal with negativity, and you don't always call it negativity and see it as negativity. It frustrates me sometimes when people just become overly describing things as negative, when in my mind nothing is inherently negative or inherently positive. It's how you look at it that makes it so. Shakespeare had a quote that was nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So, for instance, if you're looking at a painting or you're watching a movie, let's say that the painting has, what looks like destructive images of, let's say, some chick stabbing some dude in the painting or whatever, some violent image, and somebody says, oh, that's such a negative painting. That doesn't necessarily mean that the painting is negative. You are viewing it as negative. Now, the reason, another example would be, let's say you watch a movie and the ending is not this happy-go-lucky ending. More independent movies aren't as fantastical and fantasy-driven as some of the mainstream movies, but let's say you watch a movie and the ending isn't this happy ending. It's, in your eyes, it's negative. Let's say the person dies in the end, or it's sad, or it's evil, or the evil dude character wins. This does not necessarily make the entire movie this negative movie. People become hyper vigilant and hypersensitive to negativity when they're usually fresh out of a time period of their life of being excessively negative. So if you've had really hard times, if you've been in a transition period in your life, or a hard time in your life when you've dealt with a lot of pain and a lot of negativity, then at some point when you start to get out of that depression or out of that negativity, you start to form a system in order to better yourself and heal yourself, and in order to get away from this pain and this negativity, this extreme negativity that you've experienced. You start to formulate this hardened system of rules that you are trying to basically do everything you can to get away from the pain. So your mind becomes divisive, it becomes divided. You start to separate everything in life into, it's either positive or it's negative. It's either good for me or it's bad for me, because this is your attempt to get away from the pain. You have to be able to describe what is causing your pain, your depression, your whatever, in order to get away from it. First, you have to analyze it, describe it, and then you have to figure out which direction to go that's more positive, right? So this can be an important step in getting away from these negative, hard times. But you don't want to get to the point where everything becomes so polarized that you do not have any acceptance or empathy or compassion for negative people, or people that are going through hard times. When as you're getting out of this, you become hypersensitized and hypervigilant. And post-traumatic stress disorder literally hypersensitizes your nervous system on a physiological level as well. So I have some studies on that. So it's almost like your mind becomes militarized, almost like the movie Inception, to the point that no, I can't take one more ounce of this negativity. So I don't have any room in my life for anything that I deem as negative or that I see as negative. And so you end up limiting yourself in some ways, and you end up overly polarized to the point where you have to live up to this, I gotta always be happy, I gotta always be positive, I gotta always put on this smiling face, and in doing so, you are somewhat, you can risk that you get into this denial mode, that you are denying that you are, like, let's say you do have a bad day, or you still have a little bit of suffering that you're going through, or some hard times. You just put on this fake face that you are happy. And yes, it sometimes in life you do need to lie to yourself, and you do need to be in that denial, because on a quantum physics level, yes, to some degree, what you think is what you become, right? Whether you think you're right or whether you think you're wrong, or how's it go? Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you are right, right? So quantum physics and self-help, these principles apply, that yes, what you believe in your mind becomes your reality. So you do need to practice some of that at certain stages of your life. I'm just emphasizing that we need balance, and that we don't want to become so excessively positive that we're denying the hard times, and that we are repressing them into the shadow, into the unconscious. Okay, this is what happens in life when our shadow, or in psychological Jungian terms, when we start to deny our shadow. Our shadow is like the socially unacceptable behaviors and thoughts that we have, and the taboo things that we think, and the instinctual drives, the depraved kind of destructive kind of tendencies, the shadow, the darker aspects of ourselves. When these are repressed too much, you can have, in psychology, you become this multiple personality, you have this divided personality, you can have more neurotic tendencies, you become more hostile towards other people sometimes. You can have you basically end up projecting on other people also, if you repress these sexual instincts or these certain things. So the goal of psychology is to integrate the shadow, so you're not so neurotic. And so, when you become overly disciplined and overly ascetic in your life, it becomes too much. And so then you kind of alternate between the two extremes. Let's say you're eating, super super healthy, and you're so strict, that you eat so healthy that your discipline can only last so long. 3 days, 4 days, you're able to eat like really really healthy. On that fifth day, you just like eat a bunch of crap and junk. That's a stupid little example. But your whole day is just eating all this crap. Whereas if you were to cheat just a little bit on those days and have a more balanced, more sustainable diet that includes some guilty pleasures every now and then, you're not going to have an entire day of eating nothing but pizza and cake and just crap. That's a stupid example, but a lot of people still struggle with these things, diet or whatever it may be. So another example would be, the sinner becomes the saint, or the saint becomes the sinner. If you're trying to live this saintly life and you're imposing so much discipline and depriving yourself so much, at some point there's going to be a counterbalance, right? Every action, every force applied in one direction creates a force applied equally in the opposite direction, right? This is like Newton's third law or something, one of Newton's laws. Another example would be, say, someone like MLK or something, right? He was this almost saintly figure in a way, for the African American movement, and just civil rights, and he. And yet he cheated on his wife, and he, so an example would be like cheating. You're trying to be this dude in the white hat, like that movie, Donnie Brasco. You're trying to be this dude in the white hat, but you can't always live up to that. It's very tense and hard to always practice what you're preaching. So your preaching ought to be a little more balanced, that includes some of the darker aspects, rather than just being overly preachy on one side of things. You become almost dictator-like, and positivity becomes dogmatic. It almost becomes a religion. It becomes just too extreme. And so then you end up cheating on your wife, or you end up, because your shadow will rebel against your ego and your super ego and your persona. Your persona is kind of like what you want to be and how you want to be viewed in public and in life, and and yet you have, everybody has multiple parts to their self. There's multiple selves. You got the id, you got the shadow, you got the anima, you got the persona, you got the unconscious, you got the conscious, right? You got the subconscious. The shadow would be considered more the id, the unconscious, parts of yourself. So you got to strike this balance a little bit better. You can also sometimes become you become dissociated from your own self, from your own deeper instinctual drives, and this can be bad, because and some people will mistake like demonic possession, and call somebody who like has this Jekyll Hyde scenario. Let's say you go out drinking and you're that type of person that is like the prude normally when you're not inebriated, and then when you drink alcohol you become like this crazed, like alter ego Jekyll and Hyde scenario. This is a case where you've repressed your shadow too much. You've repressed your unacceptable, taboo, instincts that we all have, that some people think come from our animal nature in our evolution. And so that's a key sign as well. You have this polarized kind of self. It's alternating between two extremes when you could just have a more balanced, more easygoing kind of like, I don't have to be positive at all times, you know? Yes, positivity is very beneficial in certain times, but don't over apply it. Don't apply it to things like, you know, a painting or a movie. No, that's not negative. It doesn't mean it's negative. You're just viewing it like that. Just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, negativity is in the eye of the beholder, which basically means it's in your own eye. Your own mind is what's negative, that's calling that negative, you know. These are a few ideas. I'm going to talk about astrology as well. So yes, on the fresh out of coming out of depression or something, you separate things into good and evil. You become hyper judgmental about certain things. You don't, because you're trying to get away from that negativity. You've experienced enough already. You don't want any more ounce. You don't want one more ounce or any more bit of it. But at some point, as you do enough affirmations and as you start thinking in a more positive, nature naturally, the only reason that you need affirmations is if you're naturally thinking in a very negative fashion. As you do more affirmations and tell yourself positive things, I'm the greatest, I can do this, I can do that, I'm intelligent, I'm this, I'm that. As you start to do that, you start to become that more and more over time, but your actions have to follow your affirmations as well. And as you do more actions that are in line and that are positive actions, you also naturally become a little more just balanced between negativity and positivity. And at that point, you don't necessarily need to continue this dogmatic, dictatorial, like, I'm going to burn every bridge of every person that is, negative behind me because I'm this high horse enlightened being. Now I'm on this certain level. I think I'm above everybody. This is a dangerous attitude. Very dangerous for the reasons I've mentioned. So, you don't want to be crazed on the positivity side, right? You can actually limit your opportunities. Yes, if you're overly negative, you are limiting your possibilities and your potential. Because if you think you can do something, if you believe in yourself and believe you can do something, of course you're going to have more success at doing that thing. But sometimes you also want to know your limitations as well. If you get to the point where you've been trying to be an artist for 15 years and you became a better artist, you became much better at it, but it's still a very hardcore struggle for you even though you're better at it. Maybe you should, maybe at some point you need to know your limitations and you need to know when to quit also. Not that you should completely quit something, but maybe you, instead of trying to put all your energy in to become an artist in order to make money off art, maybe you should turn it into a hobby, keep it a little pleasure of yours, and go after something else that comes a little more natural to you. Maybe you become a writer instead, because you're naturally better at writing, or you're naturally better at speaking, or and Jung said the shadow contents, all these darker aspects of art, I want to bang that chick over there. I want to, I just want to kill that dude. I hate him. All these, really dark aspects. They can be a source for creativity as well. Jung called the shadow the seat of creativity. So you can miss out on a lot of sources of creativity if you're repressing things too much, right? If you naturally want to be, promiscuous, that's your natural tendency to want to have sexual experiences and want to experience a lot of different women or men, or whether you're a woman or a man, whatever. if you are repressing that too much because, oh, that's not acceptable in society, whereas in other societies, nudity is more accepted than America. Violence is accepted here, yet nudity is not here on television, whereas in other countries it's the opposite. And violent things are considered more taboo and not acceptable socially, whereas nudity is more okay. So it depends on where you live, right? But let's say you're that person that wants to do these promiscuous things, yet you're repressing it too much to the point that you're acting like this prude that's, what happens is you call everybody else a slut, right? If you within yourself have these dark tendencies, instincts to want to be a slut, right? Yet you don't know it because it's unconscious, because you've repressed it down into the unconscious. You will call everybody else a slut, even though that's projection. You're projecting on other people. So you can't have healthy interactions with other people if you're repressing too much into the shadow, trying to be too positive all the time, right? In some ways. So you're looking at, oh, that chick, you see some chick with a low cut, top or a short dress or something, she's dressed so slutty or whatever, if you're a chick and you always have the tendency to like call out people for looking slutty. That probably means that deep down in your unconscious, you naturally are a slut. Okay? I'm not saying that you should completely embrace you shouldn't indulge in negativity. You shouldn't indulge in all these depraved instincts that everybody has to some degree. But you should accept them, right? And you should realize and make them conscious and integrate them somehow healthily and in a balanced way into your conscious mind and into your life. Jung said also that the more you repress your shadow, the blacker and more intense it becomes, or something like that. So, what was it? Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. So this is where these extremes come in, where the more you repress, the more like you can become, the saint becomes the sinner. You'll sin more dramatically if you repress too much than if you were to have a little more balance. Let's say you want to eat a few cookies every now and then, but you're so disciplined and you're so imposing your discipline and on yourself, like I said, you're gonna then eat the whole box of cookies instead of just eating a couple cookies every other day. You're gonna eat the whole box, because you're too extreme. Okay. Nietzsche had a book called Beyond Good and Evil. As I said, to me, nothing is inherently good or inherently bad. It's how you think that makes it so. And in Beyond Good and Evil, the Ubermensch, the Superman, makes his own morality and is not controlled by the herd morality that thinks things are deems certain aspects of life good and deems other things as bad or negative. You have to get to this place beyond good and evil in a way, if you want to live how you want to live and be a more integrated, whole, individuated person. This is the goal of, shadow psychology. You integrate the shadow, you become less neurotic, you become more whole, you become less extreme, and you become a little healthier in the long run, and you become more individuated because you're making a part of yourself more conscious. Things in life are about making things more conscious. If you believe that you're on this consciousness level and you're on this consciousness tip and you're always researching consciousness things, yet you're only looking at the light of your own nature and not the dark, you're not really seeing the whole picture. A lot of people well, not a lot of people, but Ralph Waldo Emerson was actually criticized in some ways for his writing. Even though he's my favorite author, he's almost excessively optimistic and positive, and he's actually been criticized for not even being aware or lessening the importance of the darker aspects of human nature. Somebody wrote a critical analysis of Emerson that said that. And so, yes, positivity very beneficial in certain times to get you to where you need to get to. But once you are at that level where you needed to be a little healthier because you've done more positive things, now you can relax a little bit and come to this more balanced yin within yang, yang within yin, kind of mindset. That is the yin yang, right? In every astrological zodiac sign, they are considered, there's polarity for each one. Let's say if you're an Aries, or you're there's positive traits of Aries and there's negative traits of Aries, and you can see them both ways. You are very assertive, you could say, or a more negative side of that, you could say, is that you're overly domineering, or so there's a negative and positive with each sign. And then also within that, each sign is considered inherently yin or inherently yang, inherently positive or inherently negative. And this doesn't mean literally positive or negative. It means, more yin and yang. Yang is more, active and assertive and extroverted. Yin is more introverted and reactive and receptive and things. So the yang would be Aries is yang, Taurus is yin, and it alternates. So Aries yang, Taurus yin, Gemini yang, Cancer yin. It alternates. You can go throughout linearly follow the whole, zodiac around that way. So, so knowing these parts of yourself, you may be have better self-awareness, better happiness if you start to understand your nature in a more, start to understand all these different parts of yourself. That's all I'm advocating for, and I'm advocating for balance. Not that balance is everything all the time, but at some point in the longevity conversation, if you want to do something that's sustainable, balance is the only thing that's sustainable long term. Temporarily, you can be out of balance if you're really trying to achieve something, but it won't last forever. You won't be able to sustain it forever. So those are a few things. Positivity, negativity, again, it's just advocating for accepting the negativity, not that you should, I personally don't like to accept things like that. I like to be on the side of, no, I can create myself and I can be who I want to be. But it becomes overly dogmatic. This self-help generation is becoming too out of balance, too polarized, right? So there's, whether you're a person that thinks that you can create yourself, or whether you are a more fixed mindset person that thinks, I will just be myself. It's two different mindsets, You got to be aware of both, and reconcile the opposites within yourself. You won't be able to deal with adversity if you are too extreme in one part of yourself. If you are you're living from the corners of parts of yourself in different, so you're using one part of yourself at your job, and then another part of yourself is apparent with your relationships, and then a different part of yourself you're acting a different way with other people, your friends or your family. You won't be able to deal with real life or real adversity if you're this fragmented self, because you will crumble. You don't have a strong whole center foundation. You're not centralized. So important to really take on real adversity and live real life. This is important too. So, and you know, at some point, at some point you don't have to always be so concerned with your own self. Once you become a little healthier in mind and body, Lord, free me of myself so that I can please you. You can't free yourself of yourself until you become a little more positive, but also integrate the negative and realize the entirety of who you are. So that's when you can truly progress and grow, and that's where you can find that fertile ground for sources of creativity. The shadow being the negative aspects, being the source of creativity. Emerson said something to the effect of nothing exceptional or grand can be spoken except by the agitated soul. So yes, you need this level of being pissed off and agitated, and in order to speak something great to the world and carry a great message to the world, you need to be a little frustrated, right? So let's talk a little more about the astrology too, because so there's fixed, there's cardinal, there's fixed. And these are the qualities of different zodiac signs. There's cardinal, there's fixed, and there's mutable, right? So a fixed mindset might be a little less likely to maybe become this idealistic, overly positive person in response to, let's say, a fixed mindset sign like a Capricorn or something, or a Taurus. Let's say they went through these hard times. Maybe they'd be less likely to become this dogmatic convert to the religion of positivity, because they naturally have a fixed mindset. A more mutable, more idealistic person that believes that they are malleable and that they can change themselves, and they kind of morph. Malleable signs like Virgo, or mutable signs Virgo, Gemini. These would be more. I'm going to try and become somebody else. I'm going to try and become a better person. I'm going to try and become a greater version of myself. I'm going to try and become my higher self. They might be more prone to think that than, say, a fixed sign. Maybe, it's just a guess. Actually, Capricorn is not fixed. Taurus is fixed, as well as Scorpio is a fixed sign. Okay, so signs and planets that have to do with the shadow as well. How can I find my shadow in my astrology chart? How do I figure out what I'm repressing and what I'm trying to bury into my unconscious that's actually going to manifest sometimes in a harmful way? You can manifest if you repress too much. You also end up attracting the wrong people, maybe because you're not conscious of your unconscious motivations. Let's say you try with all your might to not be this sensual, selfish person, but deep down in your unconscious, that's who you are. So you'll attract maybe selfish, sensual people. Let's say you deny relationships. You don't want a family. You don't want relationships. That's what you identify with least. Then you might attract people like that, very attachment-oriented people that want family and and things like this. So Pluto would be one significator, I'd say, for your shadow, because Pluto is involved in what is hidden and secretive and what is unconscious to you in some ways. So Pluto could be one. Saturn could be another thing to look at in your chart, because Saturn is kind of what has brought you pain and wounded you. Saturn is the 10th house, which is related to status and ego, which sometimes will bring the darker aspects out to light and expose your, Pluto could also be exposing your inner self to the outer world in a way as well. But Saturn's also the father. What your father told you can't do, and what's not acceptable, you bury those tendencies, those natural tendencies down deep within you. The seventh house, a big significator, because the seventh house is the descendant in your chart. So if you know your ascendant, then you also know your descendant. Let's say your ascendant is Pisces, your descendant would be Libra. So yeah, or really it would be Virgo, but the seventh house, it would be Virgo. It would be Pisces, Virgo. Seventh house is where kind of the dark one of the dark spots in your chart. Okay, because the ascendant is when the sun is rising on the horizon. The descendant would be where it's setting, where it's dark, and below the descendant is where it's dark as well. So it's kind of almost like it's the farthest away. It's the opposite. It's the farthest opposite of the ascendant. The ascendant's when the sun is rising, the light. Okay, the sun is setting. The descendant, the seventh house, is where it is darker. Okay, so let's say, let's say seventh house is in Libra as opposed to Virgo. And seventh house is associated with Libra anyway. You might, it's kind of like, this is where you identify with things the least. That's so not me. So like seventh house is like relationships and partnerships. So you might say, that's so not me. I'm not into relationships. I'm into just doing my own thing, and I don't like to be attached to people and this and that, right? So because that's what you are repressing, that's you're identifying that the least, you're saying that's not me. So then you kind of end up attracting that because you're not conscious of it, so you got to make these things conscious. So seventh house, also your Imam Coeli, the bottom of heaven, could be something to look at. The fourth house, basically, of your chart, could indicate your shadow, what you're repressing, with the instinctual childhood kind of fantasies that you're repressing, the drives. Because Imam Coeli is the bottom of heaven. So the highest point in your chart, the very top of the mountain of your chart, is always the 10th house. That's the midheaven. Okay, so that's where the sun is brightest in the sky at high noon, right? So then the darkest point is like midnight, the Imam Coeli, where there's no light. Okay, so it's an unconscious. It's where you're coming from in childhood in ways. So that's something to look at. You could also look at your moon. Would be interesting, because moon is can be something to look at there. Because its moon can be related to instincts. Neptune might be something to look at because it's drugs, delusion, alcoholism, isolation. It's getting into trouble sometimes. That would be something to look at. Lilith would be something to look at, which is an asteroid, which some people have called the anima, which is the female shadow self. So all the female side of your male nature, if you're a male, the female side that you're repressing, because we're in such a male-dominated society, and we can't show any female tendencies like the inherent female characteristics, like being more emotional or whatever, or being more nurturing. That Lilith would be something to look at, where that is in your chart. And you can determine some different things. Interesting thing to note is Carl Jung had his sun in the 7th. The light of his chart, the ego, the self, was in the shade. The 7th is the shade. So he understands the shadow because he was born at a time, and his sun was in the sign of, and in the house when he was born in the evening. He was born around sunset, 7:30, 8, around that time. I can relate to this because I was born around 7:30, 8-ish. So so your ego is in a way in the shadow. Your light is in the shadow. You find the light from the darkness. You can't have darkness without light. You can't have light without darkness. You can't have yin without yang. They all coexist together. You need to think in a more number two mindset sometimes rather than a number one single-minded fashion. Okay, this is the only way, you know. Think in and be able to hold in your mind two opposing things at one time. Be able to hold the paradox within you at the same time. You don't always have to think in a single-minded fashion. Yes, if you're very ambitious, a single-minded, focused, disciplined place to be and hardcore work ethic, yes, important. But just be careful in the long run. So take ownership, take responsibility of your shadow. Yes, be the greatest version of yourself. Try to, but, understand the opposite of that. What else do I need to say? Another little quote that would have to do with like the midheaven, the high noon of your chart. As a person, that's Capricorn. That's the 10th house. You've reached the zenith. You've reached the highest point almost. If you think of things in that linear up and down fashion of evolutionarily evolving in astrology signs. It's, if you are a Capricorn, there is no higher place to go in your growth and spiritual evolution astrologically. Yes, there is, but there isn't. Yes, Capricorns are climbers, but they're already in a way at the very top in some spiritual ways. Even though they may not seem that way, because they have Saturn, a lot of fear, etc. You can look at it that way. So certain people that are on in astrology, Aries is considered the child, and as you go further down, you're getting a little older. Leo's a little older, then you get to Virgo, you're a little older. You're maybe Virgo, Libra, you're middle-aged, and then when you get to Capricorn, that's the old man, right? Aries and Gemini and Taurus, more childlike. Okay, so as you come around this way, that's what happens. In a way, in your soul's age, kind of in a way. But so, what else I want to say about this zenith is, I have a little quote that when you reach the mountaintop, all you come down with is a set of rules, okay? Rigid rules. So let's say you've reached this high level of consciousness and you're a smart guy, you're a smart girl, you think you're really conscious and you've really cultured yourself, you've really read a lot, you're well read, you've learned a lot, you have a lot to offer, you're a very valuable person, you've reached this high height in a certain field, you're a genius when it comes to, you're a successful lawyer, you're a successful, whatever. You or in your mind, when you've reached this certain level that you think you're so much more conscious than other people, or you've reached this level of positivity that's like you're better than other people because you're so positive, then you're like, you come down from that mountaintop with this set of rules, when you've gotten out of the darkness. Now you have all these rules in order to stay at the top, right? You become rigid. You're saying like, it's like Moses going to Mount Sinai and coming down with the 10 Commandments. Okay, now you say this is how it has to be in order to stay this great way. This is how I have to be in order to stay this way. This is how other people need to be in order to be that way. You impose these high standards, these impossible high standards on other people, and you become almost dictator-like. You have all these rigid rules, and you don't bend with the wind, and things like that. I also want to mention the 7th house being I can't remember what I was going to say about that now, so I'll come back to that. I have a few other things here I want to make sure I cover. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. Okay? If you have Sun in the 7th, if you have a lot of 7th aspects in your chart, your astrology chart, you may believe more in fate and less in that you can control your fate. Okay? Less that you can decide your destiny and be who you want to be and do whatever you want to do in life. And so same goes with not making this shadow, not making this negativity, not making your negative tendencies conscious, burying them down there so much, you'll have accidents. You'll crash your car, or I don't want to put that in your mind, but you'll break your leg or whatever, because you had this unconscious stuff boiling and brewing down there that was drawing this event to you. Okay, it happens outside as fate. You don't think you're in control of it. You have this accident, or you end up, like I said, you end up cheating on somebody. Like, how did that happen to me? I've never been that type of person, but yet it happened. I feel like it wasn't even my fault. It just happened, type of thing. It's like this fate kind of tendency, because you weren't conscious, and you were too overbalanced on the side of, I'm righteous and I'm good and I want to be a good person and I want to be a positive influence on others and I want to be the greatest, and all this stuff. It's great, but it has its limit. These things can happen. Accidents will happen, or things will manifest outside as what you think is fate, but really you drew it to you because it was buried down there in your unconscious. You should have made it conscious, and you could have gotten out of the way of this. You could have gotten out of the way of your own self. Also, some people say we tend to have a negativity bias, that we are biased towards in our evolution to notice and remember things more that are negative in order to not be harmed by things, right? You don't want to be hurt anymore. Let's say you're hunting out on the African plains, and you stepped in a snake hole and a snake bit you. From now here forward, you're gonna watch your footing and look at the ground where the holes are, so that doesn't happen again, right? So you remember that because it was painful, because you almost died, whatever. You have a over tendency to remember certain negative things. That's just one thing, to think about there. Not that we should indulge in negativity, but sometimes if you overindulge in negativity, then you go the other way and overindulge in positivity. Don't be in denial. All this stuff. What else? What else did I want to say? I should align with them. You are become hypersensitized. Okay. Don't deprive yourself too much. Don't divide your own consciousness too much. Okay, am I an animal or am I an angel? I mean, I've lived through some of this, so I can speak on it because I made these T-shirts at one point that basically have two choices. When I was fresh out of hard times, when I was just coming out of really hard times, trying to make a difference and trying to change my life. You have to make choices between two options. Are you an animal? Are you going to go with the animal instincts, or are you an angel? Are you more spiritual? Are you going to go with happiness? Are you going to live for happiness, or are you going to live for pleasure? These are T-shirts that I've had in the past, designs. A T-shirt that says positivity or negativity. Make your choice. Fear or love. Choose one. Choose love, right? Suffering or spiritual transformations. Those are your choices in life. You can either suffer or you can transform spiritually. So yeah, again, to separate these things initially into categories can be part of the process of changing your life and becoming a more positive person. But it's dangerous if you go to the extreme. And it just frustrates me when I'm around people that have become too rigid, and anything I say, like as a Virgo, I'm analytical, and people misinterpret analyzing for negativity often. They deem it as critical. I could be analyzing something, and yes, when you're analyzing, oftentimes you're going to pick out the negative little tiny parts of things, because the whole point is to improve it. That's how you improve things, by picking out and getting rid of, pulling out what's bad or what's negative or what's not useful. That's what Virgos are best at. They're best at figuring out what's wrong so you can fix it. The whole point is to fix things, and to serve. But if I'm analyzing something, oh, that's like, that sewing machine is not sewing at as fast a rate as the one I used to have, or whatever. It sounds like high horse and indignant or something. It sounds mean, or if you're picking apart a person, you're saying like, what happened? You used to be more, yesterday you were happy and today you're angry or whatever. Or you're and that's bad examples, but or this salad is like, there's too many tomatoes in this salad, or whatever stupid example you can come up with. It doesn't mean I'm criticizing. It doesn't mean it's negative. I'm not being negative. I'm simply pointing out what's in front of me. Yeah, I could point out the positives, like, oh, this salad tastes, maybe there's too many tomatoes, but this feta cheese tastes amazing or something. Point out the good and bad if you're a Virgo. Don't just point out the bad, because people will get sick of that, right? The bad, the negative. But I oftentimes, when I'm analyzing, I don't actually mean anything by it. I simply am analyzing. That's what you need to understand about Virgos if you're talking to a Virgo. They don't always mean anything detrimental or negative towards you or anything. That's just simply their way. They're simply analyzing. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Oh, that sign is like extremely bright, or that dresser is a very rich color of wood, or these little details we pick up on. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just our way. It doesn't mean that we're being negative. Nothing is inherently negative. Nothing is inherently positive, but thinking makes it so. Okay, how you look at it. Also, number 11 in numerology. I'm almost done here. I just want to wrap it up. Number 11, watch out for, because number 11, you can often become the dictator with number 11. Pluto can become the dictator. Scorpio can become so rigid, so disciplined, so focused that they burn the bridges and they don't allow anything or anyone in their life that, and it gets annoying when people are calling things negative that are not really negative. It's just annoying. It's just, yeah, if you're the Debbie Downer that's always negative, fine. Like, don't be around that person. It's always negative, but negativity is where the light is also. These dark times, these hard times is where the good stuff comes out of, because you learn so much. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn about life. You become passionate about certain things. You have to start to research in order to figure out how to overcome the pain, right? So it ends up a good thing in the long run. So have vision, have a long vision, realize that hard times are temporary and that they're not really negative, really. Yeah, they're hard times, accept them, realize, don't deny that they're hard. Don't say that, if life really is sucking right now, realize that life sucks and think about what to do about it. That's where the positive spin comes in. That's where positivity comes in. What can I do about this? Positivity doesn't mean that you deny that things suck, right? So it doesn't mean that you pretend that everything's great when you're on your deathbed and about to die from cancer or something. No, you accept that things suck, but you realize also that there is good that you can find within that suck. Right? That's where the little positive spin comes in. So don't be excessively positive, don't be excessively negative. Find the balance. Hopefully I covered just about everything. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything else that I wanted to say. Dangers of excessive positivity, folks. Hitler also had the sun in the seventh. His light was in the shade, the shadow. So you can understand the shadow. But yet your light is also obscured in some way. Your sun is not in its full potential. So in a way, you're born into the darkness. But there's parts, there's certain parts of the zodiac that are dark. So the northern or the it's hard to say northern or southern, but winter time basically is the second half of the zodiac from Libra to Pisces could be considered the darker months, the darker the yin, whereas the beginning half of the zodiac is the yang. Also, it's another way to look at things. Let me lay out Hitler quickly, because you lose empathy and compassion, as I said, if you become overly positive. You lose empathy. We need more empathy and compassion for those people who are still going through the hard times. Let's say you got out of the hard times. Now you're this positive guru, motivational speaker. You think you're awesome. You don't have any time anymore for negative people. Everything, anything that's negative, I don't have any time for that. You become dictatorial, lose empathy, lose compassion. This is what happened to Hitler in a way. Okay, because let's say you overcome all these obstacles. When you say, all these hardships, you become like this person that's sometimes you're prone to this. Well, I overcame all these things. Why can't everybody else? When you reach this height in consciousness, in intelligence, you're like, well, I was able to do it. I worked hard. I fucking was in the trenches of, this troubled times, and I overcame them. So in a way, you can lose empathy and compassion for other people. This, I think, kind of almost happened to Hitler. Now you look around. Now that you're in the light, you're not in the dark anymore. You're not this negative person anymore. You're in the light now. You're like, and you look around you, and you're like, nobody else fucking put in the time or the effort or learned how to overcome their issues. And you look around and you're lonely. You're like, I became this great person. What the hell for? Because nobody else is great. Everybody sucks, right? You have this attitude, so you lose compassion, you lose empathy in some ways. And that loneliness hurts you. Okay, so when you're hurt, you start to, that pain, you don't like pain, right? So you blame other people, you get pissed at other people. As you become more and more confident that you're the greatest, you're awesome, you lose confidence in other people sometimes. Everybody else sucks. You can get into this attitude, and it's dangerous, because it can then isolate you further. You impose these high standards on other people, as I mentioned, these unhealthy, these strict standards, and in Hitler's case, you impose this unrealistic justice on this one group of people, the Jewish population, and homosexuals and degenerates and whoever else he deemed unworthy, because they're not as good as him. He developed such a high horse, I'm better than everybody, Screw them. They're not even human. They're not even deserving of life. I overcame, my struggles, and why couldn't they? Why? And so you become this dick in a way, and you become overly judgmental of other people. You gotta have empathy for those people that are still in the struggle, and you won't be affected by the negativity anymore anyway, because you've reached a certain point to where negativity doesn't really affect you, because you're not on the same frequency as negativity anymore. When you're over applying your positive mindset, all about positivity and that's it, you're still your shadow is still has too many negative things in it in a way. You're still really unconsciously, you're still pretty negative if you're actually easily affected, easily influenced by negative people. Eventually you become less, like I said, you become less reactive to everything, and you're not as reactive to negative people. You can deal with it. It doesn't really bug you because you have gotten used to, your heart has become a little bit more hardened to, in a way, which it sounds bad, but it's in a way it's good, in a way it's bad, but become more stoic. You're not as susceptible to the influence from negative people because you're not on that frequency anymore. You've reached a different frequency. Okay, so if you're still affected by it, maybe you should look at yourself, maybe not yell at those negative people, and figure out how to make that negative situation a little more positive if you need to. So the only other thing I'll say is, mutable people, generally mutable signs in zodiac, generally are more easily influenced by others. So they do need to be a little careful of their surroundings more than other signs. However, don't be crazed, positivity, dogmatic freak. Okay? Mercury, for instance, on a physiological level, has a large core and very little crust, not much of an ego in a way, right? It is the literal planet Mercury. It has a huge core, very deep, a lot of rich things deep down in Mercury people, right? They're thinkers, they're deep in a way. Yet, and they don't have a big enough shell to protect themselves from the influence of others. So they can sometimes be more easily influenced too. However, the goal is to get in balance, make it all conscious. That's the goal of psychology. That's the goal of Collin Chi. Bring in the balance, bring in the holistic mindset, the holistic picture. Look at each part of everything. Don't just be single-minded and look at one part of life and your mind and be healthier. You're going to end up limiting yourself, actually, if your mindset is too rigid. Yes, you'll limit yourself if you're too negative, but you can limit yourself if you're too positive. Saturn's associated with limitation. If you're too positive, you can limit yourself because you're almost so positive that, like I said, I'm going to be an artist, and you just live your dream to the end, even though you maybe you didn't have to overcome every obstacle. Maybe that obstacle was there to divert you to a better path, a more natural path fitted for you. Think about both things. Think about it all, both and, not either or mindset. Think about the East, not just the West. Think about intuition, spirituality, metaphysics, not just science, not just hardened, etc., etc. Collin Chi, certified nutritional consultant. I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you got something out of it. I at least gave you some amazing quotes. Maybe I repeated myself a little here and there. But if you'd like a nutritional consultation, which I'm the best at, or if you want a numerology consultation, hit me up at collinchi@gmail.com. I will put a link in the description below. Like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, rise up, but also rise down, rise sideways, rise in every direction, be a complete whole person, and later. Yin yang.